The public is being conditioned to watch the skies for missiles. Lockheed confirms it plans to dramatically turn up Patriot missile production. This is the kinetic theater, the expensive, visible deterrent designed to reassure markets and project strength. It is also a strategic misdirection. The mathematical certainty of the current Russian attritional vector, projected by the Institute for the Study of War into 2026, dictates that a symmetric industrial response is a solvency trap. Adversaries facing a defeat scenario will not attempt to match this kinetic output. The response is asymmetric. The primary vector is not a launch-on warning event. It is silence. Analysts at CSIS document the true vulnerability. The undersea fiber optic cables that carry 97% of all global data and trillions in daily financial transactions. The second vector targets low Earth orbit, satellite blinding. This is not about destroying armies, it is about inducing systemic paralysis. This protocol creates the blind Leviathan. The Western military financial complex, a colossal entity, is rendered inert without its nervous system of data. It cannot transact, navigate, or communicate. An adversary does not need to slay the giant. They only need to sever its optic nerves. The result is not a crater, it is a global liquidity freeze. A systemic solvency crisis executed without a single ballistic launch. The conflict is not a war for territory. It is a solvency crisis. The Kremlin is not operating as a nation-state. It is operating as a distressed corporate entity on the brink of liquidation. Every tank destroyed, every missile fired, is a line item on a balance sheet bleeding into the red. The Institute for the Study of War's 2026 campaign assessments confirm a state of protracted kinetic attrition. This is a deliberate strategy. The West's response is not diplomatic, it is industrial. Lockheed's public statements on dramatically increasing Patriot missile production are not a threat. They are an invoice. This creates a mathematical trap. The kinetic cost of symmetric warfare becomes unsustainable. Concurrently, analysis from strategic bodies like CSIS highlights the war as a severe domestic liability, eroding internal political capital. The state is being bankrupted from without and hollowed out from within. This is the motive. When conventional parity is impossible and state solvency is threatened, the doctrine must pivot. The adversary is forced to bypass the symmetric battlefield entirely and escalate asymmetrically. Weakness is the accelerant for this protocol. The target shifts from military hardware to the West's true center of gravity, its fragile financial architecture. It is a launch-on warning posture against economic annihilation. The objective is no longer to win the war, but to make the cost of winning fatally expensive for the victor by triggering a systemic contagion. The central equation of modern warfare is no longer about troop numbers or territorial control. It is a solvency problem. Analysts at RUSI have quantified the lethal cost exchange. A main battle tank, a $5 million asset representing decades of industrial investment, can be neutralized by a $500 first-person view drone. This is not an anomaly. It is the new baseline for kinetic engagement. The cost ratio is 10,000 to 1. No economic model can sustain this burn rate. This phenomenon is clinically referred to as the democratization of violence. The term signifies a systemic shift. The capacity to project lethal standoff force is no longer a monopoly of nation-states with legacy industrial bases like Lockheed. It has been decentralized. A non-state actor, or a conventionally weaker state, can now achieve strategic effects for the cost of consumer electronics. They bypass the need for symmetric industrial parity entirely. The Western response, a symmetric industrial ramp-up, is a mathematical trap. Producing more $5 million assets to counter $500 threats is an act of economic self-immolation. It accelerates the adversary's strategy. They are not trying to win a war of attrition against our military. They are executing a war of attrition against our treasury. Every drone they launch forces a massively disproportionate financial output from our side, draining liquidity and turning our primary strength, our economy, into a systemic liability. The decisive battles of the next phase will not be fought in the trenches forecasted by the Institute for the Study of War for 2026. They will be staged from politically unstable regions, used as proxy laboratories to test and launch asymmetric attacks against Western solvency. This is not a theory. It is a vector identified by Rusi and other analysts. These gray zones are the launch points for the terminal phase of an economic war. The trigger event is documented. The SAIS review of international affairs confirms multilateralism is on the brink, citing the systemic failure of the WTO's Economic Arbitration Protocol. This failure is the primary accelerant for protracted kinetic conflict. The Western response, per Business Insider, is a symmetric industrial ramp-up. Lockheed Martin dramatically increasing Patriot missile production. This strategy is a mathematical trap, creating a colossal, long-term economic liability. A conventionally weaker adversary facing an endless stream of kinetic assets has no mathematical incentive to achieve parity. The logical response is to bypass the battlefield entirely and escalate asymmetrically. The target is the West's true center of gravity, its fragile financial architecture and brittle social cohesion. We see symptoms of this brittleness already, as reported by Sky News, where a police chief must publicly deny using AI for crowd control assessments, a sign of deep institutional distrust. These gray zones, regions with high instability and low friction access to global networks, become the perfect staging ground. They are not the cause. They are the weapons platform. From here, adversaries can execute systemic attacks, targeting payment systems, triggering liquidity crises, or deploying information warfare to shatter social trust. This isn't about seizing territory. It's about triggering a solvency cascade. The kinetic cost of the symmetric ramp-up guarantees the West is too leveraged to absorb the shock. Prediction. Within 18 months, expect a major financial disruption event, not attributed to a state actor, but originating from a recognized gray zone region. It will not be a kinetic attack. It will be a protocol attack targeting a core node of financial plumbing, designed to test the West's capacity for a systemic launch-on-warning response. The objective is to force a choice between a financial crash or a military escalation, a zero-sum outcome engineered by the failure of economic multilateralism. The math does not lie. The launch-on-warning doctrine is not a strategy. It is a mathematical protocol triggered by time-to-impact compression. According to analysts at CSIS, with hypersonic delivery systems, the window between detection and termination is functionally zero. The only variable is the integrity of the warning signal itself. This creates the primary asymmetric vector for a conventionally outmatched adversary facing a symmetric industrial ramp-up, such as Lockheed's increased Patriot production. The objective is not to defeat the missile, but to corrupt the data that confirms its launch. A targeted cyber attack creates the fog of digital war. Early warning radar goes blind. The command authority is now forced into a binary solvency crisis. Is it a system error, or is the lack of signal the signal itself, a precursor to a decapitation strike? The protocol forces the commander's hand. To not launch is to risk total annihilation. To launch is to act on a potential phantom. This is the trap, using the West's own defensive logic as the trigger for a systemic or nuclear event, bypassing the kinetic cost entirely. The escalation is a mathematical certainty. As the Institute for the Study of War projects attritional conflict into 2026, and Lockheed confirms a dramatic ramp-up of Patriot missile production, the West commits to a symmetric industrial strategy. This is a solvency trap. For an adversary facing kinetic defeat, matching this output dollar for dollar is impossible. The logical protocol is to bypass the battlefield entirely and execute an asymmetric attack on the true center of gravity. the West's fragile logistics and financial architecture, a weakness amplified by collapsing social trust, a process observed by security analysts in everything from policing strategies to public assembly bans. The initial strike vector will not be kinetic. It will be a calibration shot to test systemic fragility and response time. Within the next 10 months, anticipate a coordinated, attribution-impossible data event targeting a Tier 1 Western intermodal port. The objective is not physical destruction, but the induced paralysis of its terminal operating system. Cargo manifests erased, container crane logistics corrupted, shipping arrivals unsynced. The kinetic cost is zero. The economic liability cascades into the billions within 72 hours. This is the test fire, a non-violent demonstration of the capability to induce a systemic solvency crisis on demand.